Hi, everyone. We're going to start in just a minute, but if you could make sure that you have your camera off and your microphone muted, you can ask any questions once we get started by putting them in the chat box. We have Libby Simmons monitoring the chat box for us, and we'll make sure we get to your questions. So hang tight. We'll start right at 1 o'clock in just a second. Well, actually, it is 1 o'clock, so we'll get started. I am so happy to see some new names and faces this afternoon, and I'd like to welcome you to our first meeting of new SLPs and new SLPAs. We have some goals for today, and those goals include knowing that you're part of it, that you have a team to support you, know where to go when you have questions, access the new therapist team, know that you're not alone, and I want you to feel supported by the time we're finished today. So we'd like to welcome you. Typically, when we have our new therapist boot camp, is what we've called them in the past, I went ahead and kept that name for this time since it was in our survey, registration. But from now on, we're going to be calling it the New Therapist Conference. Boot camp sounds like it's a little harsh and that kind of thing, and what we're really here to do is to support you. But typically, we'd be having these face-to-face meetings. We'd have them for 2 days, and you would spend the night. We'd have meals together, and we would do some fun activities together, some hands-on activities. This year, of course, that's going to be a little unreasonable to expect. So we'll be doing everything virtually, but there are so many advantages to doing things virtually that I think we're going to find out we're going to like it just as much. I know you've had a busy first week and a first busy couple of weeks, I'm sure. And at this point, you are probably feeling like you don't have time to be this busy. And you're probably right, you don't. But hopefully things are going to calm down for you, and we'll give you some tips and some tricks that'll make things a little easier. And just remember, if you're brand new to the school system, you're having to learn a lot of information all at once. So it's not always going to be this way. But for right now, I'm sure that you are tired, because even when things are all the way they normally were, that first week of school is a killer. Even though I don't take naps any other time, I would come home straight from school that first week of school and definitely have a nap. So just wanted you to know, if you're tired, there's a reason for it, and you're not alone. Everybody's feeling that way too. So the main thing I want you to do is remember, it's Friday afternoon. You're going to have some support. So just take a breath and breathe. We've got this. We're going to help you get through this. And you have the skills to get through this on your own. And whatever skills you don't have, we'll try to provide for you, like working in the school system and that kind of thing. But just know that you can take a breath. It's all going to be okay. And you don't have to know everything day one. We are all, oh, sorry.
All right.
All right, let's see how much you already know about working in the schools. Who are the 3 most important people to know in your school? Is it the principal, classroom teachers, counselor? Put in the chat box who you think is an important person to know in your school. Please, and Libby, if you can give me some answers.
I'm watching the chat box.
Okay.
Anybody have any ideas? The IEP coordinator is one suggestion. Other special ed.
Okay, those are great suggestions. those are very great suggestions. And you're exactly right. Those people are important. There's no doubt about it. But let me just say that there are some other important people too. The custodian, because you're going to find out you're going to need the custodian to do things for you, and you need to be have a good relationship with that custodian. Same thing for the secretary. The secretary is going to have to provide you a lot of information about new enterers and where to find information in the office about students at your school. So please make sure to have a good relationship with that secretary. And the cooks. You're going to find out that you need a good relationship with those cooks. If you don't have that, it makes it a little difficult sometimes, especially if you're trying to do some hands-on activities and that kind of thing with preschoolers, and or if you come in late between schools and that kind of thing. So, you know, these are the people that are important to know in that building as well. Normally, when we do this activity, we're together in a big room, and we have everyone go around the room and tell what county they're from, their name, and one thing that will help us remember them. And that's not going to be possible for us to do today because we don't want to take up valuable time to do it, for one thing. But the other reason is because we're going to have you do that by answering one question at the end, a little survey at the end. And we're going to be able to share that information to help you guys get to know each other. That's one of the main things we wanted to do, and why we wanted to start so early. Typically, we have these meetings in October, mid-October, but we wanted to start so early because we know this is an unprecedented year. We also know that lead SLPs, if you have a lead SLP in your county, they're very busy with getting everything started and probably not having as much time as they typically would to meet with you. So that's another reason we wanted to go ahead and have this meeting early. But we think it's important for you guys to develop relationships with each other and to know that there's somebody else out there that's in the same boat you are. And so this will be some information we can share with each other. Just so you can get to know me a little bit. I worked for 34 years as a speech language pathologist in Kanawha County schools. The last 7 years, I did all of their OGCOM evaluations. My areas of interest are autism, AAC, and apraxia in preschool. And that's basically because that was what I ended up with for the last 20 years. I was in a primary center that had preschool through second grade. So that's where some of those interests were developed. I've been the coordinator at the West Virginia Department of Education for speech language impaired, assistive technology, which includes AAC, occupational physical therapy, and accessible educational materials. I just celebrated my 4-year anniversary of starting there. That was September 6th. And then one thing to remember about me, to help you remember me, is that if I could do anything I wanted to, I would be either driving a Formula One race car or singing backup for Bon Jovi. I also want to introduce you to my right-hand person and my amazing friend, Libby Simmons. She works part-time with me at the Department of Ed. She originally started working with the University of Cincinnati online distance learning cohort, and her job with us has evolved into so much more because I needed her support for one thing, because she's so capable for another and has such a wide variety of experience. She worked in Kanawha County schools for a total of 17 years as a speech language pathologist. She was an assistant professor at Marshall University for 3 years, and some of you may have had her in classes. She was assistive technology coordinator for Birth to 3 for 4 years. She was director of Children's Therapy Clinic for 8 years. She was a speech language pathologist for the Cerebral Palsy Clinic. And her areas of special interest include AAC. I learned a lot about what I know about AAC from courses I used to, in different seminars she used to give. She's preschool certified, and she also is interested in working with low-income inner-city school children and in program development. One thing to remember about Libby is that she was once a part of the Kanawha Clowns. She dressed up as a clown, had all the makeup, everything, because she loved to be able to be with children and be able to make them laugh and smile. And that's just Libby's personality. If you don't know her, you'll get to know her and you'll find out that's exactly like she is. One of the big things I'm sure you're asking yourself is, who the heck do I call when I have a question, and who can answer my questions? And this is just a real simple, excuse me, diagram to kind of help you try to figure out where you need to go for answers. The West Virginia Department of Ed, which is me, as far as your contact is concerned, is where you can go for questions about Policy 2419. Anything from the guidance documents for the SLP or the SLPAs, assistive technology, if you have AAC questions, that kind of thing, you can come to me. And then any speech pathology related questions. So if you need someone to bounce ideas off of, or someone to ask some questions about, if you're concerned about a situation, or need some support in trying to figure out how to address the needs of a student, you're welcome to call me. That's why I'm here. If you have questions about county procedures, like how the county does IEP meetings, how they do referrals, how they do sweep screenings in the fall, anything related to what your job is within the county, that you ask that question within the county, either from your special ed director, excuse me, or if you have a lead therapist in your county, then you go to the lead therapist with those types of questions. If you have principal problems, problems with your principal not wanting you to pull students, or whatever the issue may be, not having a place to work, that kind of thing, those are issues that you contact your county special education staff about. And parent issues. And definitely, if you have a lead SLP, go to them with county questions. One of the first things I want you to know, because I was really confused about this when I started at the State Department, I thought that everyone across the state did everything exactly the same as we did in Kanawha County. I thought we all had the same procedures. I thought the State Department dictated everything that happened within the schools. That couldn't be farther from wrong. Each county, because we are a state that has local control, each county special education director designs and devises the procedures and the protocols that you use for everything that happens in your county. What the State Department of Education does is provide you with guidance. The only thing that we really dictate is Policy 2419. So everything else can be different. And that's important for you to realize, because as you start meeting people within this group, or you start talking to each other, if you both find that you have a similar interest and you start talking, I want you to understand that what happens in one county is not going to be the same thing that happens in another. So don't get confused by that, and don't get bogged down by thinking, well, why do we do it this way? That way sounds so much better. The reason you're doing it the way you do in your county is because that's what your special education director has determined, and they have the right and the responsibility to do that. So I just wanted to mention that so you would understand that everybody's going to do things differently. Thank you so much to those of you who completed surveys when you did your registration. And this shows us what you feel like you need the most training on right off the bat. And it looks like documentation and organization and scheduling are your two most pressing needs, and then the online IEP. So what we decided to do, like I said, this is different this year than we've ever done it in the past. So what we've decided to do is not wait until the end of October, because that means end of September. That's what we had originally decided we would probably do, and then just offer a couple of hours a day of different webinars. What we're going to do for documentation and scheduling is we're going to prepare 2 webinars for you to be able to watch, plus some resources on documentation and scheduling for you to have. And we're going to have that ready for you by this coming Wednesday. We will post it in your Teams group, and we'll go through and look at your Teams group in a little bit. And you'll find information there, and we'll let you know exactly where to look when it's posted in your Teams group. That way you will have time to go through that and rewind it if you need to, watch it however many times you need to, and then be able to come back to us next Friday at 1 o'clock. And we can do just some question and answer and some coaching session for anyone who needs it. If you understand the documentation, or you have your own system, if you understand scheduling and you don't need any support, then you will not need to be on that coaching session next Friday at 1. But this way, we're trying to support you as quickly as possible with the information that you need. The next need is online IEP, and we actually have a coordinator at the State Department named Michael Knighton. And if you haven't met Michael Knighton in the past, you're going to love being able to work with him, because not only is he extremely knowledgeable, but he's very kind, very understanding, and very entertaining. So we will get in contact with Michael Knighton and have him do some online training with you for online IEP as soon as possible. It probably will not be next week, but hopefully the week after. We'll definitely let you know when those meetings are going to happen. And I apologize for the late notice for this meeting. With this beginning week, we've had a lot of different things going on in our office, and typically meetings that go out to the special ed directors, or any information that goes out to special ed directors, has to be approved by our director. And her name is Susan Beck. She's the director of Special Office of Special Education. And this has been extremely fast week, and a week of different things happening. And unfortunately, the notice to special ed directors didn't get sent when it was supposed to. So anyway, I apologize for anyone who is not able to be on here, but we are recording, so you'll be able to watch it later. And I promise you will get more notice from now on when meetings are going to happen. Hopefully we'll be able to work out this weekend when our next meetings will take place every month and what trainings will happen those months. I just wanted to go over some basic information with you now, because number one, I don't know what your lead SLP has been able to talk with you about. I also don't know how many of you have prior experience, perhaps in another county, but now you've moved to a new county. You're going to find out very quickly that counties do things differently. So, just be open to that, keep your mind open. But I do feel like I need to tell you, you therapists who are just starting out, about Policy 2419, because that honestly dictates everything that we do in special education. And that is the actual responsibility of our office, to establish that policy and enforce it. So this is just a link to the policy, and it's available online. And we also have printed manuals. I'm going to make sure that you have a copy of the printed manual as well. But for right now, this is how you can access it online. What I'm going to do is just go through some quick speech-related pieces of the policy for you to make sure that you know where things are. These are just some of the changes that happened. And you'll hear a lot about the 80-day timeline for initial evaluations. And these are some clarifications about that, and the page numbers are listed. I would suggest that when you get your printed copy that we'll be mailing you, or if you print off a copy, or you even want to keep it as a digital copy. I know a lot of younger people don't want hard copies of anything anymore. So even your digital copies, you can highlight those places so that you can find them easily. But this information, like the revised timeline from 10 to 5 school days, to request parent consent when additional evaluations are needed. Those kinds of things are important for you to understand. So make sure you go through those. The reason it was updated the last time was because we had to remove references to No Child Left Behind and add ESSA, the Elementary and Secondary Education Act. Whenever there's a new president, typically there's a new act, and this one was established by the Obama administration. It removed highly qualified personnel references, and it added state-defined alternate diploma. For IEP development, one of the things I wanted to point out is there are 2 sections that were added to Policy 2419 that refer specifically to students with hearing impairment, and we're involved in both of these situations. So I wanted to make sure that you understood that these clauses are in there. It added a requirement that lack of progress in receptive or expressive language of deaf or hard of hearing students must be explained in the present levels of educational achievement and functional performance, or you'll hear it referred to as the PLAF, and reflected in the goals and outcomes. It's on page 51, but the big thing I want you to remember is It's a team. The team looks at the progress, and the team has to explain why that hasn't happened. Now, the fact that they have lack of progress in receptive and expressive language, you're probably going to be one of the people who is measuring that, but the team determines why that's happening, and the team addresses it. This just has some information about revoking consent, and that's important for you to know if you have a parent who wants to remove their child from speech services. But be sure and follow the county procedure for doing that, because some counties do that differently. Section M says that following the meeting, the teachers must participate in the IEP development, and you're going to hear that. They're a mandatory member of the IEP team. But what you're going to find out is sometimes they are not present, and they participated by phone or by virtual means. Now that's going to be happening a lot. And if that happens, then they're responsible for doing the Read IEP app and making sure that those modifications that are listed or identified are in place in their classroom. And that's important, especially if you have a student who has an augmentative communication device and you have goals written so that the student uses the device during classroom activities. It's important that that classroom teacher realizes she's responsible for making that happen. The appendices are just supplements to the body of the manual and are not adopted or considered to be part of policy. So I have like a developmental norms chart, and I have one for elimination of phonological process disorders. And those are listed in policy, but they are not what you have to use. You use what your county says that you've used to determine eligibility for a student. For deaf, hard of hearing, this is another clause that was added. For a child who's deaf or hard of hearing, a comprehensive language assessment in the child's language and communication mode must be included in his or her comprehensive evaluation. So especially those students who are transferring from birth to 3, who we already know have a hearing impairment, when they come to the school system, you're required to do a comprehensive language evaluation on those students in their native language. So if they use sign language, the evaluation takes place in sign language. If they are verbal or they use spoken language, then that's how you administer their evaluation. We had a team of a speech language pathologist, a deaf, hard of hearing teacher, and an audiologist do a webinar for us this summer on doing evaluations on students who are deaf, hard of hearing, because as you know, there aren't any tests that we administer that are normed for those students. So that webinar, we will make sure you get a link to in the handouts, the PowerPoint that went along with it. It's very informative, and they're also creating a guidance document for us. They are consultants that we've used in the past, friends of ours, you may know them, Karen Haynes from WVU, and I've just gone blank, I'm sorry. But there's a deaf, hard of hearing teacher as well, and oh my goodness, that's horrible.
Are you talking about Mary Ann?
No, it's not Mary Ann. Mary Ann's the low incidence coordinator. The audiologist, Gail Nelden. I'm so sorry. She used to be the audiologist at WVU, and Karen and Gail have both retired, but they're helping us as consultants. Thank you. I appreciate that. And then there's also a new evaluation that you might be hearing about called a functional listening evaluation. And I want you to know that those may be requested. And sometimes SLPs are the people who do those. You only will be tagged to do one of those if you've been trained to do them. So if you haven't, contact your lead SLP or your special ed director if an FLE comes up with a student that you're serving. And this is where, the other clauses about lack of progress in receptive and expressive. And so you can see that the IEP team is the one who makes those determinations. Normally, when we have a student who's identified with a disability, if they're another disability besides speech language impairment, we typically become the related service. If they're if they have a specific learning disability, if they have autism, if they have an intellectual disability, those kinds of things. Typically, speech language impairment or communication becomes the secondary service. It's not the primary eligibility, and we become a related service. But for students who are gifted, because IDEA does not count gifted as being a disability, if you have a student who's gifted, then that student, their primary eligibility is speech language impaired, and we are that case manager for that student. That's changed for any of you who may have worked in the school system in the past. So I just wanted to make sure and point that out. There were some additional changes that were made, but one thing that I think you guys need to definitely know about is that you have to complete 12 hours of professional learning directly related to the field of speech pathology every year. You need to keep track of your own documentation that those have been completed. And when I say directly related to the field of speech pathology, I'm talking about it has to be related to phonology or language, AAC, those types of things. Literacy would count. Excuse me. We're also allowing things like children who have NAS, suffer from NAS, because that directly relates to our field. If you go through county training on doing step ladders and bloodborne pathogens and that kind of thing, that is not directly related to the field, so those do not count. What we do try to do is provide ASHA CEUs for any trainings that we provide, and we'll continue to do that throughout this year. So I just wanted to point out that that is a responsibility that you have to do that 12 hours. I want to make sure you understand the 3 prongs of eligibility that are listed in Policy 2419, because that determines whether or not a student's made eligible for speech services. And you have to answer these 3 questions. Does the student meet eligibility requirements for speech and/or language impairment? And those eligibility requirements are found in Policy 2419. Is there an adverse educational impact? We've done a lot of training the last several years on educational relevance in determining whether or not there is a true educational impact on the student based on their speech disability that we've identified them with. Because so many times we were trained clinically, and if we hear, a misarticulation or, a sound that's not developmentally appropriate, we automatically refer that student, even though it might not have affected their academics. So make sure that when you make eligibility determinations, that you are determining that there is an adverse impact either on them academically, socially, or vocationally, depending on the age of your student. An example of a social impact might be a student who has fluency issues and is hesitant to talk out in class or respond in class. Those types of social impacts are important, and it does affect his ability to access his environment at school. So that is something that he would qualify for services for. We'll make sure that we go through eligibility determination in one of our trainings so that you can fully understand this, but I wanted to make sure you heard about this right off the bat. As a result, does a child need specially designed instruction? So those are the 3 questions you have to answer for each student you're considering for eligibility for speech services. There were some changes to the speech language impaired regs, just as far as organization, not as far as what's listed there now. Now, I will tell you that for language, right now they have to have a standard score of 78. That will be changing when we update Policy 2419, because we realize now that we are not identifying all the students that we should that have underlying language disabilities. So that will be changing. We've done a lot of training the last 2 years on language, comprehensive language evaluations, dynamic assessments, that kind of thing, and some language interventions. So most of those trainings have been recorded, and we'll make sure that you have access to them so that you can catch up if you haven't been hearing them in the last couple of years. And instead of using the fluency chart that used to be used, now You can use any of your tests that you have out there for fluency, any of your formalized tests, but they have to be in the moderate or severe range to qualify for services. In social pragmatic communication disorder, if you haven't heard of that, it's definitely something that's come up since the DSM-5 came out. It's a category that was created and placed in our area of expertise and our eligibility criteria. And it's for students who do not have autism, but have an overall social language impairment, a pragmatic impairment that affects them in all areas. It can't just be someone who is affected in the classroom or just in certain locations. It has to be global. There are a lot of there's a lot of criteria for each one of those areas, and you have to do observations, a lot of observations, checklists, evaluations. It's not just something that you can say, well, they didn't qualify for anything else, so we'll give them this. The big thing to remember too is autism has to be ruled out first. So there probably shouldn't be a time that you're going to be referring anyone for social pragmatic communication disorder. What's likely to happen is a student is going to go through a student assistance team because they're having issues in their classroom. And with that, if autism is recommended, if a test of evaluation for autism is recommended, that lets you know that they're thinking that they might be in that on the spectrum. If they don't qualify, then they might be looking at social pragmatic communication disorder. But what you don't want to do is put yourself in a position where you're asking a team to do an autism evaluation because you think a child has some pragmatic skill issues. So we'll make sure you get some extra training on that too. But if that comes up and you think that you might have somebody you need to refer, please call me or text me or email me, and let's talk about it before anything like that happens, if we haven't had our training first. And I just talked about this, that, you know, you have to have multiple observations and communication partners and that kind of thing. And another thing to remember is with voice disorders, you have to have clearance from ENT prior to determining eligibility for voice services. So just remember that even though a child may sound hoarse this time of year, they may be having some allergies and that kind of thing. It's always a good idea to consult your health nurse to see what she says, to consult the parent, to see if this is something that's been, you know, going on for a long time or if it's just seasonal. But just remember, you cannot make an eligibility, make anyone eligible for voice therapy until you have that ENT recommendation. And there are some special considerations in Policy 2419 that I think you need to know about. And one of them is that if verbal communication is not an effective means of communication, then an augmentative communication evaluation must be conducted to provide alternate means of communication. If you guys have listened to the news or seen the news in the last year or so, you've seen that there have been some cases where there have been nonverbal students who've been allegedly abused in classrooms across the nation, not just in the state. One of the things that happens with that is those children were nonverbal. They didn't have a means of communication, and they should have had. So please make sure that if you have a student who is nonverbal, and especially if they're older than 3, if they're 3 or older and they are not talking, then, you know, it's time to do an augmentative communication evaluation on those students. Because if you think about the vocabulary and speech of a 3-year-old, and you have a 3-year-old who's not speaking at all, there's a definite issue there. And even if they're what some people call late bloomer, to me, late bloomers are people who are kids who have T for K and K for G and those kinds of things, B for B, those kinds of things. But someone who's not speaking at all and has no means of communication at 30, that's not a late bloomer. That's somebody with a problem. So we need to address that. I noticed in the survey that AAC was right behind the documentation and scheduling. So we'll be sure and do a session on your responsibilities for AAC and how to go through getting an AAC evaluation completed. and using the AT guidance document. So we will do that with you because it is really important for you to keep this in mind. There is a webinar too on Policy 2419. It's located here. And we also have special education forms. In the forms, you can download from the website, but they're also generated in the online IEP. For you to get familiar with the forms and what's included in the online IEP, it might be a good idea for you to go to find these forms and look them up and make yourself aware of what happens with all of them. There is a direction page for each one, and it tells you how to fill it out, how to complete it, and that kind of thing. When I first started in Kanawha County a long time ago, I did that with the forms. That was one of the first things I did. And it really helped me because I knew which forms went together, that kind of thing, and which forms you needed to use for each meeting. So that's something you can definitely make yourself familiar with. There's also a booklet that's available, and we'll be sending that to you too, along with the Policy 2419. One thing I just wanted to mention to you, and I know you've heard it time and time again, but it's amazing how many times I know I've done it. I know I've breached confidentiality, not intentionally, but seeing someone in the hallway and them asking a question, me responding to it. But as you create your own records and your own documentation, make sure that you have it in a secure location. Don't discuss students with anyone other than the members of his IEP team. And sometimes that's hard because, a teacher will see something going on with the student in the classroom and they'll come to you in the hallway, and they'll come to you, what was going on with Timmy today? He was having a big fit in the hallway. Well, they don't have that student. They're not familiar with their information, and it's really not appropriate to share that information with them. Even though they work in the school, they don't work with that student. So make sure that you just try to gracefully say, I'm really not sure what was going on with him, but obviously his team had it handled or something like that, just so you're not sharing any information, because what you say to one teacher can get all around the building in no time. Don't use students' names in the subject line of an email. When you're sending out emails to someone asking questions about a student, do not use their name in the email subject line. And if you can keep from it, don't use their whole name in the body of the email. Use first initial, last name. Use initials, some way to identify them other than stating their name, if at all possible. Just because even though our email system is secure, it's definitely something like, especially if you put something in the subject line, I could accidentally pull up my email in a little bit here when I change screens, and you could see the email, and it's inappropriate for students' names to be in those subject lines. And don't take pictures, videos, post pictures or videos of students without parent written permission. So many times something's going to happen in your therapy room and you're going to say, oh my gosh, this is so great. I'm so excited. I want his mom to see what he's doing. But typically what happens is at the beginning of the school year, each school has a permission form that they send out that gives permission for videos and photos and that kind of thing. If you want to do something like that, make sure that parent has signed permission for those to be taken. Because what happens a lot of times is some of these children are in foster homes. They are not to have their pictures taken. Some may be in divorce situations where they're hiding out from a parent. And if you post their pictures on social media or any place that someone could see them, then it puts that child in danger. And that's not a position that you would intentionally ever put yourself in. But please make sure that you don't do that unless you know that there's written permission. And maybe even have talked to the parent. If he does something incredible in therapy, is it okay if I video it and send it to you? That kind of thing before you do anything. So, be careful. And if you're in doubt, don't do it. Don't do it at all. For the web, to find our information on the website, it's a little hidden, but this is a great way to let you know what to click on. When you go to the WVDE.us website, you'll look at the WVDE first, and you'll click on the Teaching and Learning tab. We're in the Division of Teaching and Learning. And then you'll look under Special Education. then exceptionalities, and then there we are, speech language impairment. And that's where you can find the SLP guidance document. It's an older guidance document. I think it was in 2015. We're in the process of updating it. We just completed updating the SLPA guidance document that's still listed on our website right now. It's 2013, but it's going to be changed. What's happened is that because of so many reentry documents having to be posted and changed every day on the website, there's not as much time for them to update our other websites like they typically do. So we'll make sure that you have the updated versions of these documents until they're all posted. And then with speech language impairment, there are some fact sheets that you can use to give parents. There's one for parents and teachers, and there's just a general one. There's also professional learning. Any webinars that we've done that are posted on our website will be posted there. And then organizations that might be related, like ASHA, those kinds of things are listed, and then other documents. Almost all the documents in our document section right now are outdated, but the good news is they've all been updated, except that SLP guidance document, and they'll all be posted soon. I wanted to mention that we have a telepractice training and support group and teams. Rhea Dyer, some of you may not have heard of her yet, but she is the owner of Best Life and Integrated Therapy Services, a private contractor who serves, I think it's over 20 school systems in the state. She also is the president of the West Virginia Speech and Hearing Association. Thankfully, we have a great partnership with her, and she is providing monthly telepractice training sessions for us, and we record those as well. She provides tips, tricks, and different equipment to use, different websites to use, different apps, and that kind of thing. So if you're having to provide any type of teletherapy service, please think about joining that group. As a matter of fact, I think what I'm going to ask Libby to do is put you guys in that group. I think I might have already asked her to do that. And then if you get in there, you look around and you think you don't need any of that information, you can take yourself out of the group. But it's got a lot of great information in there. And all the webinars that she's done so far, except for one, are posted there. She also has a webinar that she did for us this summer about doing virtual evaluations. It's very good. And the PowerPoints are posted for those as well. We created a team for you guys that's just going to have you guys in it. And Libby's added you to it. If you were listed as a guest when you came in, it's because you haven't been added yet, and we'll get that done. But that's where we're going to post information directly related to you guys, because you guys are going to need, like, the webinars on documentation and scheduling. You're going to need some support documents for those kinds of things, and we'll post all that information there. That's also a place that you guys can go in and post questions to each other or to us, and we'll make sure we keep checking those to get that to happen. And we'll do some training with you next time on how to post things in that group quickly, or we might even do a webinar for that because I don't want to tie you up too much with especially this early in the year when I know you're trying to do your first 45-day screenings and learn your county protocols and that kind of thing. I don't want to tie you too much in training. So if we do webinars, that gives you the opportunity to watch them when you have time available and then come to us with questions. So we'll go through the team more later. I just wanted to mention a couple of things to you about scheduling. I know that you're going to be gathering information from your classroom teachers about when it's all right for you to see their students. This year, since it's, depending on how school started in your county, you may be seeing students virtually, you may be seeing them in person. So just remember when you're scheduling, traditionally, therapists have used like a 30-minute time blocks with therapy scheduled back to back, but you're going to have to leave time this year to be able to sanitize between groups of students or individual students if you're doing in person. And you're going to have time to switch out your materials and get your meeting started if you're doing teletherapy. So just some general scheduling considerations to make. when you're trying to get your schedule, some of the puzzle pieces you need are the teacher schedules, direct instructional time for reading and math, other therapist schedules. So if a student has multiple disabilities or has complex needs and maybe has OT, PT, deaf, hard of hearing teacher, or a teacher of the visually impaired, it's important to get their schedules too, so your services don't overlap. You need to know when they're getting reading intervention and their special education times to make up your schedule. You cannot take students during direct reading instruction, direct math instruction, PE, or recess. And a lot of times I can tell you teachers are going to say, take them during recess, because that way they're in the teacher's mind, they're not missing any direct instruction. But they are required to have that physical break. And they honestly need it. And let me tell you, you'll be the most unpopular person in the world if you take them out of the recess. So that's the time you do not want to take them out. You can't take them out. You can take them out during library times, during music, art, or during computer lab. If they're doing some independent work and they're not getting direct instruction, you can take them during those times as well. How well does that all work? Honestly, you'll think you've got a schedule ready and then something happens and it changes. So just know that you're going to have to be flexible. There's no way around it. And with the three different reentry models that we're looking at, it's going to be difficult to get your schedule done. So that's the reason we wanted to go ahead and do some training with you right away on doing schedules. There are some COVID-19 considerations that we haven't had to make in the past, like some policies on itinerant staff going into the classroom or pulling students out of the pod. Our special ed director has been working with teachers and principals and superintendents for the last couple of months this summer, training them on what's going to happen when special education services are offered. So if you are not allowed to go into a pod because they're trying to keep all those students together, or a core group, they're calling them that too, you might have to offer virtual therapy services to that student. But that doesn't mean you have to offer it when they're at home. You could possibly offer it when they're at school on a classroom computer in the classroom. So we'll go over some more of those scheduling options too, but just remember these are going to be some things you're going to encounter that you might not have encountered in the past or during your training. I'm sorry, I obviously borrowed some of these slides from another presentation, but if you go to the West Virginia Department of Education reentry site, and you just click on reentry, there is a toolkit that comes up. That's really important information. It tells you about safety precautions, about what happens if a student is identified as having COVID, those kinds of things. So make sure that you are familiar with that reentry that toolkit. I think it's 28 to 30 pages, but it's worth printing off if you have a capability to do that. It doesn't need to be in color. You could do it in black and white, but that's a good document for you to have. Another good document for you to have is the COVID-19 COVID-19 recovery services versus compensatory services. It's located on the website, and we'll make sure you get the link to it. But it tells you about how to consider whether or not the student needs services from the time that they missed last spring during the mandatory school closures. And your county may be talking to you about gathering data the first 30 days or so to see how much the students regressed and how much they can retain or regain that progress they were making. So if you're having to do that, and then if you have to go to meetings to discuss how much service to provide, this is a great document for you to have available and know about. Everybody's in the same boat, so don't feel like you're the only one out there who's doing all this. And honestly, experienced therapists with 20, 30 years of experience are having to do things completely differently than they've done in the past. So don't think you're the only one who's having to learn new things. Everybody's having to do that as well. Just remember about educational relevance, and we did talk about that. Keep it in the back of your mind because you're going to be hearing more and more about it. And You're going to find therapists in your county who don't believe in it. It's not that they don't believe in it. They don't believe in the significance of it, I think, because they feel in their hearts that the students who have mild articulation errors require therapy. And I get that because I've always identified them too. But what I can say is that the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act that was updated in 2004 said that any service that we provide has to be related to providing that student FAPE and that's free and appropriate public education and giving them access to their educational environment. If a student is not having academic issues, if they're not having social issues, they're talking to everybody, even though their speech is, definitely in error and people can understand them, that is not something that you can prove that they have a disability with. And the thing you have to remember is if you identify a student with a disability, you make them eligible for having a disability and write an IEP for them, and they don't have one really, then you violated their civil rights. So make sure that you consider those 3 prongs of eligibility. Like I said, we'll do some training on eligibility determination and that kind of thing, but please just keep educational relevance in the back of your mind. We do have a couple of programs that you might not have heard about. If you've heard of multi-tier system supports, what we did was take that concept and make a program called STEPS. Libby was instrumental in creating it in Kanawha County schools several years ago. And it's been recommended by the State Department since 2015. And we have some training videos prepared for that, a brochure, some forums that are already prepared. But the thing to remember about this is you can provide support and prevention activities and a little bit of therapeutic type activities. It's not really specialized instruction, but it is intervention. You can provide that to the student without having an IEP. If you're considering doing STEPS, please contact me or if your county does it, please let me know. We'll make sure you get access to that information right away. And these are just some of the different activities you can go and do with STEPS. This is just a survival tip. It says, my mission in life is not to merely survive, but to thrive, and to do so with some passion, some compassion, some humor, and some style. So while it's so easy, because we're all type A personalities and want to do things perfectly, it's so easy to get upset and think, I can't do this job. It's not going to be right. It's not going to be the way I want it. Please just remember that everybody's in that boat right now. They really, really are. And like I said, therapists who've been working for decades are struggling right now. So give yourself a break, take a breath, and just, remember, I'm going to do the very best I can for my students. Is it always going to be as perfect as I want it to be? No, it's not. But just deal with it with humor, laugh about it, and go on. And just know you're doing the very best you can. One suggestion is definitely become a part of the school community so they feel like you're a part of them. The acceptance level is so much better. Your cooperation level is better. Just instead of being somebody who just breezes in and out of their school building and doesn't really participate. Work with your principal, especially if you're having issues about places to work and that kind of thing. Work with them and let them see that you're willing to compromise and that you're only wanting to serve their students, and that'll get you a long way. Don't disappear. So many times people who are itinerant have a bad reputation because people can't find them. So make sure that someone always knows where you are. If you're supposed to be at a school, make sure the secretary, your principal, someone has a copy of your schedule to know where you are. So if you're in a classroom and they're looking for you, they won't think you're out of the building. Eat lunch with the staff some days. I would caution about doing that all the time because the gossip can really get bad in there. Plus, sometimes if they have bad attitudes, that can kind of wear off. And you can understand how they get frustrated with students and that kind of thing. But don't let yourself be caught in that trap. We do have some welcome resources we're going to be sending you. We have building blocks, yardsticks, listening sounds, and speech language pathologists in the public schools that we'll be sending you. We're also going to be sending you this Tell Me book. It's by Carol Zangari. Any of you have heard of Practical AC have heard of this. and also Making the Connection. It's a really simple book about AAC and helping parents and teachers understand how they can participate. You'll be receiving these in the mail. That's the reason we got your mailing address. We do. Whoops, sorry. Sorry. All right. Those were recorded too. I added those last second, and I apologize for not having those prepared. There is a survey that we wanted you to do. It's almost time for us to stop. And as you'll find out, I try to make sure that I am very respectful of your time. So we will finish at 2 o'clock. But what I wanted to do now was just take off this, stop sharing my screen, and let's see if you guys had some questions. Now, Libby has a meeting at 2 o'clock. So she has had to get off here. So let me look and see if I can stop sharing and see if I can pull up any questions that you have. Are you allowed to record Teams meetings? Okay, let me start right here. Questions at the end. 12 hours of CE in 1 year. Is that for the school year or calendar year? That's for the school year. But like I said, we'll be providing opportunities for you, as will your county. So don't worry about that. Just know that that's something you will be responsible for doing. Let's see what else we've got here. Are we allowed to record team meetings with students for data tracking? I would not recommend recording any meetings at all, because you're responsible for whatever happens within that recording. If you need some suggestions on how to track data and that kind of thing, I think that would be the best way for us to help you. And that is because you take on a lot of responsibility when you say you're going to record a session. Most of the telepractice consent forms the parents sign say that the sessions will not be recorded. So, and if you think about it, if you do a whole day of sessions and you're going to have to plan on going back and watching that whole day to get your data, yeah, that's not a good solution. So we'll try to help you get some better solutions. Libby says if Leanne doesn't get to your questions, they'll be copied and posted. That's true. But I'm not seeing any other questions for right now. So, excuse me. I have another meeting at 2. Yes, you do. And I'll be right on there too. So I'm going to go ahead and let you guys go. We'll be posting some information for you in your Teams group. So be sure and look at that. And thank you guys for what you're planning to do for your students. Don't give up. The meeting won't be every Friday. I will give you a schedule of our meetings so that you will know when we're going to be meeting. But for next Friday, we will have a coaching session on documentation and supervision. Documentation and scheduling after we watch the webinars. So I apologize for going so long, but there was a lot of information to tell you guys. I just want you to know you're appreciated. I'm here if you can. If you need anything, I'll make sure you get my contact information as well as my cell phone number. I'm currently working from home, so you're welcome to call me or text me there. You can't count these meetings towards trainings unless we get them approved by the licensure board. For this one, when we decided to have it so quickly, we didn't have the 2 weeks to get it approved. From now on, we will as much as possible, and we'll let you know when we do that and provide you with a certificate to prove that you attended these sessions. And so as far as our meeting right now, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording and tell you guys just to hang in there. It's really going to be okay.